Welcome in, everyone, to Let's Talk Utes. Today, we're going to be previewing the 2024 football season for the University of Utah, including offensive, defensive previews, as well as the schedule and our record predictions. So let's jump right into it. As far as the offense goes, Utah had a really down year last year in 2023. This was due to the injuries along the offensive line and especially the injury to Cam Rising that kept him out the whole year. Do we predict a bounce back for Utah in 2024?
I mean, of course, I think any Utah fan that's watched for more than just last year is going to understand that we're going to improve so much. Like, this year is going to be insane, guys. Like, enjoy it. This could be the peak of Utah football.
Yeah,
Like,
it really could be.
seriously, enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's an obvious yes for anybody who watched last year. I think you pull up 2021 or 2022 highlights of the offense, and it's honestly a night and day difference between last year's with Bryson Barnes under center. It's just not even the same team. And with Rising back, we have so much offensive talent back. So many weapons this year. It's not even going to be the same team. It's going to be like Landon said, enjoy it because this could be a special year.
Yeah, there really won't be a lot of returning production, I don't think. Obviously different quarterback, almost entirely new receiving room, losing Devon Vele, but also gaining Dorian Singer and Damian Alford and Pittman back from injury. Yeah, I think it'll be very different. That 23.2 points per game in 2023, ranked 100 in the country. I do not think we're going to see that. I think they will be closer to 40 this year.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 2022 when we had Cam, and honestly, I think that our receiving talent is even better this year. We were at 38.5 points per game. It's just going to look starkly different. The crazy thing about that is we actually had even proportionally less yards and first downs than 23.2 points per game.
Yeah,
Like we actually kind of overperformed for how few first downs we got.
exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the quarterbacks. Obviously, Rising is the headliner here. Isaac Wilson was named QB2, and Sam Huard and Brandon Rose are battling for QB 3 and 4. Starting with Rising, what do you guys expect from him this year?
I think the pass game is obviously going to be it's going to look the most different. I think from a command of the offense standpoint, I think the reads he's able to make. He's been in the system since 2019, since he transferred from Texas. I think just his comfortability with the offense, we can all see it. You watch the games. I think the difference is going to be stark when compared to again Bryson Barnes from last year, Nate Johnson, the whole QB fiasco we had. Watch for explosive pass plays with again the weapons we have on the outside. We'll get to them in a little bit. I think again Rising just the command of the offense and just the general vibe on the field is so much more different. Wits referred to Rising as the alpha dog of the team multiple times, and I think we're really going to have the opportunity to see that starting against SUU next Saturday.
I really think that against San Diego State in 2021, as soon as he came in, the vibes just completely shifted. His command of the offense, the respect he has from his teammates, his ability to deliver the ball on time, on target, and limit turnovers, which is a huge thing for the coaching staff, is just so different from anyone else on the roster, frankly.
Yeah, see, the main underrated thing about Rising is his mental game and his mental abilities. There's some quarterbacks that, oh, they did their job. Like, you can't blame them even though the team lost. They did their job. Cam is the opposite of that. He's the guy that makes everyone around him better, which is just completely invaluable at the quarterback position. Like, you saw it with the offensive line in 2021 when he came in. That offensive line was struggling, but Cam being back behind center, he's better at reading coverages. He's better at seeing where the pressure is going to come from. He's communicating that. He's making sure everyone knows what their assignment is. Like he makes others around him better, as well as obviously just being a great player himself. So super excited to have him back.
And I also think a big part of why the offense was so stagnant last year was because of the style of offense Ludwig likes to run. It's a pro style offense, and like Lennon referred to, Cam is really the only one that is able to make those reads. Those third and fourth read options. When you're looking down the field and there's pressure. Bryson, all respect to him, he did as well as he could, but it really just he never got to that even second or third read. And that's what that's what made the offense so painful to watch last year. I feel like so. I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker this year.
Yeah. I think obviously there is one thing we need to talk about, which is the risk of injury. Since that first game he started, USC in 2020, the COVID year, he's been injured at least 1 or 2 games every single year.
Yeah.
The health, I think, is a big question. So talking about the backups, I think, is important. Obviously, Isaac Wilson, true freshman out of Corner Canyon, 4-star recruit, younger brother of Zach Wilson. Everyone knows that. Was named QB2, which I think took a lot of people by surprise because I think that they expected, Brandon Rose, who's been in the system for 3 years, Sam Huard, who's been, played college football before, has experience to maybe win that out in Isaac Wilson's time to come either next year or a couple years down the road. But by all accounts, Isaac has been pretty clearly the second best quarterback in the room. I mean, Witt has said that there was, significant margin between those guys. So what do you guys think about, Isaac Wilson and if he has to play this year?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with Isaac being a 4-star younger brother of Zach, you could see the talent on his high school tape. The thing that surprised me the most was him being able to learn the offense so quickly. Like, this dude's an intellectual.
Yeah,
Like,
it takes people years
like
sometimes.
Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson, Brandon Rose, like these guys are with the program for years and they have like 20% of the playbook unlocked. And yet I remember hearing a month ago that Isaac already had almost the full playbook like installed,
Yeah, like after
ready to
spring.
go.
Yeah.
That kind of blows my mind. I don't know. That feels like kind of a Ludwig thing as well. But I also do think it reflects really highly on Isaac because if you don't know the playbook, you're not going to get in the game. And so having someone who we can sub into the game and our offense isn't immediately going to go to like, okay, 85% run, 15%
Yeah.
pass. You might get one slant you throw.
And this is not typical Witt. He's never been one to put the higher recruited guy into a position just because he was high recruited.
makes
That's
them earn
never
it.
been his MO. They've always wanted someone that they trust to run the offense and that they think is actually the best option to play.
Yeah. Well, another kind of thing that's interesting is they asked Witt what he valued the most in a quarterback. The first thing he said was not turning the ball over. And so, I mean, how highly does that speak of Isaac if he's already checked that most important box? He's not going to turn the ball over a ton. Like, that would be, I think, most people's biggest worry about him was that he'd be like his brother a little bit, where he's a bit of a gunslinger.
I still think there's some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not too much though. It's like you need to be aggressive to score,
Yeah.
and that sometimes means interceptions, which are acceptable.
I mean, there's always going to be growing pains with a true freshman. I do think that Isaac will see the field this year. But I think for Utah fans, it's been a while since. I mean, Tyler Huntley was our guy from 2017 on until 2020 when Cam hit the program, and since the beginning of 2021 season, that's Cam's been our guy. It's been a while since we've recruited a quarterback who we know will probably be the future of the program.
Yeah.
Like you guys said, the fact that Isaac Wilson is already, from all accounts that we've heard, knows the playbook pretty well by now. That's honestly really impressive. I feel like Utah fans have to feel good about having a very solid second option at QB. Because it is very possible and it is a required conversation to be had. Cam has been injury prone. It's no question. And so not only do we have a guy that we trust this year, but we also have a guy looking into the future. Witt said, I think it was the Big 12 presser this year, the Big 12 media day, that I think we're playing Miami in 2027 in Vegas.
Yeah.
And he said he likely wouldn't be the head coach for that game. It's got to give some comfort to Utah fans that we do have at least our quarterback, a guy that already knows the offense very well, that can kind of take us into the next subset of years of Utah football.
Yeah, I really think that it's best case scenario that Isaac Wilson took over the job now. Because you think of the alternatives and it's like, oh yeah, Isaac Wilson's just not ready, probably QB4 this year, running the scout team. Huard and Rose, obviously more experienced, have had time in college to adjust to that level. They're fighting it out for QB2. One of them gets it. It wouldn't disqualify you from thinking Isaac Wilson, was maybe the guy for the future. But the fact that he took the reins so quickly is unexpected, but also really clarifies the direction Utah's going, I think.
Totally
Yeah,
agree.
exactly. Just when's the last time we had a QB that was like this good this quickly?
Yeah.
Because even like Cam obviously transferred to Utah, it felt like even him winning it was kind of like an extended battle. It wasn't really certain, but it seems like Isaac has gone out there and dominated. Like, if you've been keeping up with the news, you might have heard that in like team scrimmages, he threw 5 touchdowns to 1 interception,
Yeah.
which really impressed the coaching staff. And I think that was basically the final factor on him being named QB2 officially.
Okay. I think that covers the quarterbacks pretty well. Let's move on to the offensive line. Utah, obviously, Coach Witt has said that they have their 5 starters ready, which is much earlier than they
Yeah.
have previous years. The offensive line didn't perform incredibly last year, but I think part of that was due to QB constraints, just holding the ball too long. The offensive line, they can't block for 10 seconds every
Yeah.
time. You got to get the ball out of your hands quickly. I do expect a pretty decent jump in the offensive line performance, similar to how when Rising took over initially, that
Mhm.
happened.
Yeah, I mean, I might be a little higher on the offensive line than most. Spencer Fano got a lot of just battle tested experience last year, and he obviously is extremely athletic. With him, he actually moved to right tackle. With Garcia at left tackle, we have a set of extremely athletic tackles.
So I think it's Lomu at left tackle.
Are you sure?
Is it? I think it's Garcia, right? I thought it was Lomu. Do you know, Connor?
Or is Garcia a
Actually,
guard?
don't.
I thought Garcia was a guard. I thought it was Lomu at left tackle.
Oh, I don't know. We'll have to check on that. But either way, 4-star left tackle. They have great physicals. I think the offensive line could 100% have a bounce back year.
I completely agree. I think it's so massive for Harding that we have our starting 5 completely decided before the season. And like Lennon was referring to, we have such a young core with Lomu and Fano. Like, these guys are dogs, and they I mean, they're all freshmen or sophomores. We have such a young core, and they're only going to get better. I'm honestly looking for a huge jumpstart to the season this year.
Yeah, I think they'll have a little bit better of a chance to hit the ground running. I think that the starting slow has been an issue. I think that with getting the 5 set that early and rising behind center, I don't anticipate that being the same problem.
Mm-hmm. Rising just gets the ball out so quickly. He's an elite processor where he knows where to go with the ball very quickly, and I think that takes a huge amount of pressure off of the offensive line.
Yeah, I feel like Bryson scrambling was a completely different scramble than Cam. Cam usually knows where to go when he scrambles.
Mm-hmm.
Bryson, it was much more disorganized chaos, and the offensive line, he didn't really give him a fighting chance. So I think, yeah, we're going to see a much more structured and a much more, like I said, just structured attack on the offensive line, much better block schemes. As far for the running backs as well. And our running backs, sat from all accounts of picked up the schemes for their blocking too. So I'm expecting some good things. As far as the offensive line goes.
Yeah, one more thing with the blocking is a lot of the fronts in the Big 12 are only doing 3 down linemen. It's a big change from kind of 4 down linemen that Utah's seen a lot in the Pac 12. I do think there was a little bit of an adjustment period in the Baylor game last year to
There
that,
was.
where it's you got to be more dialed in on your assignments because people can come from different places and maybe hide their blitzes and hide their pressures a little bit
Mhm.
better. So that's just something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of give and take there because that is going to make if you look, we have some stats up on screen. If you look at O-line run push, it's going to be a lot easier to get that with a 3-man front. But at the same time, it could be a little more difficult to pass block, and it also could open up the potential for more missed blocks in general.
Yeah, missed assignments.
Yeah. Another thing, I don't want to jump ahead too far. There can be some help from the tight end room as well, especially in the
Let's talk
blocking
about the
game.
tight end room. I think it's a
Yeah.
good time.
Good transition into it. Someone like Carson Ryan, elite level blocker, so he's almost like a 6th offensive lineman in there when we want to run the ball. We can also do a lot of things. You've seen the 12-man, 13 personnel, that kind of stuff takes a little pressure off the offensive line. So I think we'll be much improved in the run game.
Yeah, I think that tight ends are really a strength this year. I think that having Keithy, having Landon King, having Caleb Lohner, who by all accounts is completely dominating fall practices, and having people like Carson Ryan, Dallin Bentley, Miki Sugataraga, even if I'm not his biggest fan, I think that it is so deep and so versatile that we're going to have a ton of options there.
I think versatility is the one word I would describe, or I would use to describe the tight end room this year, because it's a Swiss Army knife. That whole room,
Yeah.
such high amounts of capability, spanning from run blocking to pass catching. Just all of them have great hands. I know where the elephant in the room is Keithy coming back from injury. I think that Cam to Keithy connection is something we've all been missing. But Carson Ryan out of UCLA, great transfer, awesome pickup, former 4-star out of Utah actually. Then he went to UCLA and is coming back home. Landon King, we saw flashes and glimpses of him last season. Even Bryson Barnes is thrown to him, which we all know wasn't the best situation. But I think that that Cam to King situation is going to be awesome, and like we just have an abundance of talent.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem in the tight end room this year is just getting enough touches to all these guys because they're all so talented.
Oh, I totally agree.
It does feel like we have so much talent. It feels like someone's going to have to transfer. But for this year, I mean, you can never have too much talent. Like if you're Georgia, if you're Alabama, you're not looking saying, "Oh, we have too much talent." Like the cream will rise to the top.
Exactly.
Whatever our best lineup is going to become apparent during the season, and then we'll just have insane depth behind that.
Yeah.
There's no way. This Utah tight end room, I think, is the best in the country. There's just so much versatility and top end potential here. It's unbelievable.
I agree with that. I think top to bottom, it's the best tight end room in the country. I think it is probably the deepest tight end room Utah's ever had, which is crazy
we're
to
going
say.
5 deep with Power 5.
Yeah, honestly, we really are.
or even more.
Yeah, so I'm expecting big things from the tight end this year. I think it's the perfect mix of veterans that know how to play, guys that can do different schemes and styles, and guys brimming with potential.
Yeah, I think honestly the only thing holding the tight end room back, barring any injuries, I know there were rumors of Carson Ryan dealing with an injury early in spring ball, and it sounds like he's getting back up to speed. But yeah, I just have to agree with the sentiment. I think top to bottom, we're this is probably the best the tight end room has ever looked, and that's insane considering in 2022 we had Keithy and Kincaid in the same tight end room with Thomas Yasmin, and we had
Fotheringham at one point.
great tight ends, and this year it's just looking better.
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about Caleb Lohner a little bit more. The reports on how he's been performing are unbelievable. It makes you wonder, how high is this dude's ceiling?
It almost seems like the coaches are in shock of what they're saying.
Yeah.
It really seems like they didn't expect this at all, and they just have not been able to keep him off the field.
Like, he hasn't played a game yet, and I'm already thinking, like, is he going to go to the NFL draft after this season?
It wouldn't shock me.
Like, that's where he could be performing at.
Just like imagine him at the NFL Combine. Like he would destroy those testing numbers.
Well, he's just such a freak athlete. I mean, playing basketball at BYU and Baylor, and then making the transition over to Utah playing football. He's such a dynamic athlete, and he's put on the weight. He's put in the required work to potentially be a starter. And crazy enough, I mean, it's his first year playing football, and I mean, he's already looking like one of the best tight ends in the room. And from all accounts that I've heard, it sounds like he's a very large culture piece of the team as well. He's one of those guys that is first to show up and last to leave the field, and that's something you need. Obviously, first year playing football, but also just when you're trying to lead the guys, he's a bit of an older guy, and it's so important to have that culture piece, especially when you're a newcomer to a team. It's so powerful.
Absolutely,
man. I just love having a talent like that on the team. The reports have been that even the Utah secondary, even Scally was getting pissed apparently at some of the DBs. They just don't know how to stop him.
How do you stop him? I don't know that it's possible, really.
Let yourself think about the scenario. What if teams just can't stop him? Like, what if he's getting targeted 10 times, 15 times a game? Like, what if he's our leading pass catcher?
6'8", that's as fast as a slot receiver. Like, what do you do with that?
Like, what if he's that dude?
Yeah, what if, it's
like
tough.
The top end potential is just insane.
Yeah, let's move on to talk about the other pass catchers, the wide receivers. Obviously, I think this is one of the most improved positions on the team coming into this year. Losing Vele, who was a vet, who was really solid for Utah, I think, takes a little bit of a toll, but I think they more than adequately replaced him. Bringing in Dorian Singer and Damian Alford as transfers, getting Micah Pittman back from injury last year, who's also a vet, who's been on a lot of productive offenses. Having Money Parks returning, guys like Luca Caldarella coming up in the room, Zipperer, some of the young guys. Tayshawn Lyons. Yeah, Zacharias Williams, who's also someone that's impressing. this is a deep, talented room, and I think there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I have to say it's very similar to the tight end room in just terms of versatility. Zacharias Williams, a guy that USC was really making a recruiting push for before he obviously committed to Utah. Tayshawn Lyons, Washington guy that played for obviously the playoff team last year. And then Dorian Singer, I would say, is probably the biggest name coming out. The USC transfer had an amazing year in 2022, I think, for Arizona, and just amazing talent. Damian Alford, leading receiver for Syracuse, coming and transferring into the program. We just have such wide versatility. And when you're watching Utah football, especially with Cam, it never felt like our receivers had been the strong suit of our offense. Obviously, they've always been more than capable, but I feel like this year we have some serious weapons on the field. I think when you say the name Money Parks, you think of the opening touchdown against Florida last
Yeah,
year,
He's a big
or
play
the
guy.
or the 3rd and 17
against
USC
USC.
touchdown in the
Oh,
Pac-12 championship. He's
yeah.
a big play guy, explosive, fast, and he's only going to get better. I think the wide receiver room this year is it really has no ceiling, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like Dorian Singer and then some of the other receivers we have this year, it's just an archetype of receiver we haven't seen at Utah for a little bit.
Yeah,
Because
Totally
we've
agree.
either had guys like Vele's awesome, kind of a catch radius guy, 6'5", or you have someone like Money Parks, awesome also, like around 6 foot, faster guy. But then when you start putting people in like Singer, he's got some of the top end talent where he's a route runner. Like he gets
yeah.
open.
I think Singer is the best talent we've had at receiver since Darren Carrington back in
agreed.
the day.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting big things. I'm certainly expecting more production than there was last year, obviously. I'm expecting more production than in 2021 and 2022 as well. I think that the offense this year, the strength of it will definitely be spreading the ball around, passing the ball. I don't think they're going to be as run heavy as they usually are. Of course, Whittingham is never going to abandon the run. It's not in his DNA.
Yeah.
But I do think the passing offense is what's going to shine this year.
Totally agree.
Agreed. I think this year there will be some real change in terms of play call. I think that we'll pass more than we ever have before. We just have to.
Do you think that we can up our explosive pass rate? Because we have never really been able to create those explosive passes, even with Cam Rising in 2021 and 2022. That was an area we really struggled, was to throw down the field and create those open passes.
I think that's a super interesting conversation. We have more talent to do it than ever before, but there's also a lot of Big 12 defenses are geared towards stopping explosive plays because a lot of them will have like 3 high safety sets. It can be hard to break through over the top on those type of defenses. I don't know. That's something I'll have to wait and see. I don't know if I can say right now, like for sure, we'll have more explosive pass.
Yeah.
I think it's two things. I think the first one, and I think people were getting frustrated with it last year, was just Ludwig's ability to call a game. Obviously, I think Ludwig overall has been a plus for Utah. I think his offense with Cam Rising, I mean, he's
It was
obviously
better
won us
than
two
A-Rod.
two Pac-12 championships. I mean, it's hard to ask for more. Although last year he definitely left a lot to be desired, and that's
Yeah.
probably an understatement. But I think if he's willing to open up the playbook for Cam, which I think he probably will be this year, I think we can see a lot more explosive plays. And then two, just the personnel. We, like Tanner said, we've never had a receiver like Dorian Singer, at least probably in a decade. I mean, Darren
Yeah.
Carrington was 2016, 2017. I think he transferred over from Oregon, and ever since then, the receiver room, it's been good, but it hasn't been great. And I feel like this is the first year where we have the potential to have a great receiving corps.
Yeah, and I mean, we got some momentum. I think we're all expecting a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, I
coming
mean,
down the pipe.
you
I
never
think.
know.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at if you're keeping track of Jerome Miles on the recruiting sites, it's looking more and more like Utah every day. So hopefully, that one falls our way. But that we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I think tight end and receiving momentum has never been higher than it is now.
Yeah. A position group whose momentum is maybe a little slower than previously is the running back room. I think that while we all love Mekhi Bernard, I think it's clear that the coaches don't really view him as that workhorse lead back that can take, 20 carries a game and take the bulk of the reps. I think they're still looking for that guy. Obviously, along with Mekhi Bernard, we have Jalen Glover, who's a vet, who's been, if not spectacular, he's been solid. Mike Mitchell has been a young guy that has been getting a lot of hype. Dijon Stanley, Hunter Andrews, And then Charlie Vincent are guys that are mentioned as, being really
Yeah.
consistent, putting in a lot of work. What do you guys think about the running back room this year?
I love Mekhi Bernard's game. I don't think it's a talent issue whatsoever that he isn't like, oh, RB1, all the coaches are praising it. I seriously just think it's a health and durability issue.
I agree.
He's injury prone. He's a little lighter. And with the kind of run game Utah likes for their RB1, it's a lot of just like ground and pound, a lot of stuff up the middle. Like, I just physically, it just doesn't suit his skill set. It's not a skill problem. It's just like he doesn't have the archetype Utah's looking for. And that's where I think Mike Mitchell comes in. Like, super physical guy, 4-star running back. I think this is going to be a big year for him. I think he'll be that kind of standard guy. He'll be in that line of the Tavions, the Zach Moss, that type of player where you look at his body type and you say, that's Utah's like number one running back.
Yeah.
That's who we've always had.
Yeah, I view Mike Mitchell similar to Isaac Wilson in terms of positionally setting up for 2025, 2026. I definitely think Mike Mitchell has the potential to be that guy for Utah, that Tavion, that Zach Moss, that Joe Williams that, we've kind of been lacking, to be honest,
Yeah.
in recent years, which is uncharacteristic for Utah. But yeah, I feel similar to, to these guys on Mekhi Bernard. I think we're going to see some pass catching this year out of the backfield, which is
Yeah.
always a plus. I guess it's been rumored that he's put on some size since last year,
Really?
which could help him become that workhorse guy. He's a veteran; he knows the playbook well, and his run blocking is above average.
Yeah.
I feel like if it is true and if he is fighting at a higher weight class, I think he really does have the potential to take over that RB1 spot. Jalen Glover looked amazing in that Colorado game last year. He had glimpses and flashes of greatness. And I mean, it's tough. I mean, to compare this room to other rooms we've had in the past. Utah's known to have great running backs, and you're gonna have down years and up years. And I feel like this isn't even a down year. It's just when you're comparing it to Tavion's record year or Zach Moss
Yeah.
and his backups that we had, and it's tough to be super excited, but I still feel like we have some guys, and overall it's a young room. I think there's a lot of room for development.
Yeah, I do think that Mekhi Bernard is going to play the most snaps. I think he's a
Yeah.
vet. The coaches know what he can do. He's a threat in all phases of the game. You can run him inside, you can run him outside, you can throw him passes, and he is the best back that we have in pass pro, which I think is really important for Utah's system specifically. But you're also hearing a lot of the things that you heard in 2021 about Tavion about Mike Mitchell. Because in 2021, we brought in TJ Pledger, we brought in
Yeah.
Chris Curry, who were both extremely highly recruited and rated guys.
Transferred from LSU and Oklahoma.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Blue chip
So
guys.
you blue chip guys. But then all the buzz was about this random JUCO guy, Tavion Thomas. And it turned out that he took over the RB1. And I kind of feel like you're hearing similar things about Mike Mitchell this year.
I feel like it's almost the exact same kind of narrative. Oh, he's big, he's physical, he plays hard, like he's hard to bring down. Like, it's the
Yeah.
kind of guy they want. I think he's going to be getting a lot of carries.
I think the biggest thing for the running backs this year is just not turning the ball over, minimizing fumbles,
Yeah.
and I feel like if all guys are able to do that, I feel like we're going to be able to have a fresh set of feet on almost every single down. I think capability wise, we're more than capable. We have guys in the room that are talented, and I just think taking care of the ball and making sure
Yeah.
that that's not an issue. Like Whit said about the quarterback, the number one trait he's looking for is people who can take care of the ball, and I think that's a similar thing for the running backs.
Yeah, I think that if we can get good production this year from the running backs, that'll be enough. Because I expect the passing offense to be so potent that the run game will be more of a supplement to the passing offense
Agreed.
rather than the other way around, how it's been a lot of times in Utah
I
history.
do feel like Mekhi Bernard in a pass-heavy offense could make an absolute killing.
Yeah.
I think he could have a really good year. Maybe not in terms of like total yards, but I just imagine, like, say a drive, we're rolling, we're passing most plays, hit him with a halfback draw, some sort of halfback swing pass. Like, I could just see him breaking some big ones.
Okay. That is the offense. Any final thoughts on the offense before we move on to the defense?
It's going to be much improved, and it is going to be an absolute pleasure to watch this year. So get excited, everyone.
I think virtually we've upgraded at every position heavily, and I really don't see any defense in the Big 12 slowing us down.
Yeah.
Obviously, barring another nightmare injury season, which was the
I think
the percentage possibility of that happening is next to zero this season.
Yeah.
Having 2 nightmare seasons in a row would be devastating, especially this year with an easier schedule. But yeah, I think just expect huge things from the offense.
Yep. I expect a return to form. I expect them to be around 40 points per game this year. That's where I've
agreed.
set my
I
expectation.
think that for the first time ever in Utah, we could score 40 points per game
Yeah.
average.
Okay, let's move on to talk a little bit about the defense. Some of the headliners that left the program were Jonah Ellis, Cole Bishop, Sione Vaki, who all were drafted in the NFL.
Miles Battle, correct?
Miles Battle, was he drafted or was he an undrafted free agent? I think he may have been an undrafted
I think he was free agent. Yeah.
Which were, there's depth to replace it. I think that the
Hubert
defense,
and Broughton gone as well.
yeah, Hubert and Broughton gone. The scoring defense last year was 19th in the country, 19.3 points per game, 307 yards per game given up, which was good for 13th in the country. Opponent adjusted defense was also 19th in the country. The rushing defense was 8th, and the passing defense was 14th. So, what do you guys think about the defense overall, big picture this year?
Big picture defense, you've got to be feeling pretty good coming into this year. You do have some losses, some are worse than others. I would definitely say we lost the most at safety with both of our starting safeties gone. But at the same time, the reports have been super favorable for like Aliki Gilman, transfer from Stanford, as well as Teo Johnson back there. And then you have someone like Nate Ritchie who's been developing. I didn't think Nate played great in the reps that he did have, but the reports on him are pretty positive. And then our defensive line is monstrous. Linebacker room's good. Corner rooms are good. I feel pretty good about the defense going into this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they maintained or improved these grades.
Well, first, I must say I am looking forward to October 19th against TCU because DeTravis Broughton will be back in Rice Eccles. And
Hater move.
if you guys have seen any of watched Utah football any of the past 2 years, he's given up quite a few big plays. I would say he's an overall positive for us. But it'll be a fun game to watch him back in Rice Eccles. I would say you're watching a Utah defense though. You're expecting greatness, and I don't think that's going to slow down. We lost Cole Bishop, obviously. I would say that's probably the biggest loss on defense. Just a general ball hawk. I remember he had a huge pick in the Baylor game last year. Just a total impact player. I feel like he's going to be a big loss. Vaki, obviously, our two-way player. But like Landon said, I think the depth pieces that we have that have just been training and honestly, Logan Fano, guys coming back from our injury-ridden season of last year. I think we're not going to have to rebuild. We're just reloading this year.
Yeah, let's start with that safety room. Obviously, Vaki and Bishop gone, both to the NFL. Bishop, huge loss. Vaki was really good as well. Replacing with the 4 guys that are really in the mix for safety, according to the Utah coaches, are Aliki Gilman, Teo Johnson, Nate Ritchie, and Jonnu Hall. I think that the coaches really like Ritchie. I think that he is a vet that they really trust. He's the kind of guy that understands the defense, and Scally thinks that he can rely on him. Teo Johnson, obviously switching from nickel to safety this year. It's a little bit of a, I guess transition, but he also had it was switched from wide receiver to nickel last year, and I thought that transition went smoothly. So I'm expecting smoothness again. Aliki Gilman is a vet, the kind of guy Utah goes after. Played for Stanford last year, and Jonnu Hall is a young guy who has a lot of potential. I think that this is one of the shakier position groups on Utah, if it can be called shaky. I'm never really going to doubt Morgan Scally's safety development because it's just not something I do. But it's definitely a group that I would say is light on experience but high on potential.
Yeah, I mean, Scally has my unwavering belief that they're going to be prepared mentally. It's just every year he's managed to produce above average safeties and defensive backs.
Yeah.
The thing I'll be interested to see most is if they can bring the physicality that Vaki and Bishop did. If you go back and watch the highlights, the physicality of that combo of safeties just absolutely stands out. They're just making plays all over the field. Like one that really stood out to me was actually first game of the season in the Florida game where Vaki had his interception. Dude, he's all on the guy, tips the ball up, pushes the wide receiver to the ground, and then catches it. It's like if we can, and then Cole Bishop had one, Arizona State, they try and run a reverse. He's just all over him. Gets him 15 yards in the backfield and drags him down.
Yeah.
So just seeing that if we're able to replace that physicality, I think we'll be in an amazing position.
Yeah, I will say, first and foremost, the Stanford defensive pipeline is real at Utah. Gabe Reed was awesome for us. Obviously, Karene Reed's older brother played for Stanford, transferred to Utah, and had a great last year. And with Aliki Gilman coming in to play safety, he's shown, from what I've heard, a lot of promise in the scrimmages and practices in both spring and fall camp. So that's a guy to watch and to be excited about. I think Nate Ritchie obviously had a great COVID year, and is coming back. It's been a little bit slow, but from all accounts by the coaches, I mean, he seems to be picking up the pace, and his ball IQ has developed quite a bit over the offseason, according to coaches. And I think Tanner was kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it could be a little bit of a shaky year for safety. I mean, you're losing Cole Bishop, one of your star
Yeah.
guys of the past decade. Honestly, I mean,
Yeah.
just a great player. But I feel like we're really, as long as Johnson pans out and he continues his trajectory, as long as Aliki Gilman can come in and be that guy, I really don't see a huge drop off in production.
Yeah, it's tough to replace two NFL safeties, but if there's someone who can do it, it's Morgan Scalley.
Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, I think the potential is really, really high there. Something that Richie has said was that he was dealing with a little bit of injury coming off an LDS mission last year, wasn't really able to get into full shape, and we didn't need him for every snap
Yeah.
really because we had those two elite players. But yeah, I think the safeties will be solid, although not the strength of our defense this year.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to the corners and nickelback. The corners, obviously, we have Zemiah Vaughn returning, who's going to be probably the top corner on the team. We have Keenan Johnson from Georgia Tech, who was a longtime starter there, senior transferred over here, Power 5 starter. We also have guys um, coming up into the pipeline as well that have quite a bit of potential. As far as nickelback goes, Smith Snowden looks like he's the early favorite to be the starter at nickel. Obviously a track star in Utah, extremely fast, great hands, good ball IQ. Played in 11 games last year, made 7 tackles. I think his role will be greatly expanded this year.
Yeah, I feel actually really good about how the corners are going to pan out this season. I've been a huge Zemiah Vaughn fan ever since he came in a couple years ago and started playing. I just love the length that he has, the speed. He has a great instinct for the ball. I also think that someone like Keenan Johnson, great. I think he will be even better at Utah than he was at Georgia Tech. And then I also think that some of the guys like Cam Calhoun is someone transferred from Michigan that I'm extremely excited about. I think he's poised to have a big year, as well as someone like Smith Snowden, who actually got a lot more reps than I thought last year. He actually played in 11 games, we realized. So he's going to have a little bit more experience than you would think, and he has the physical ability to do it. So I'm really excited for that.
I'm extremely high on this group. Vaughn is obviously, I mean, you watch any Utah game, and he very rarely is a guy giving up any big plays.
Nope. Yeah.
He's very locked down, and he's definitely the vet of that Utah secondary. Keenan Johnson, like they said, Georgia Tech guy, uh, starting experience against a Power Four conference. Just senior, it's hard to find that type of experience. And from all accounts, I've heard great things about him. Smith Snowden, young guy, but he showed amazing things last year against USC. He had a great showing, and just in all the games that he played, just very high quality reps. Cam Calhoun, guy from Michigan, huge get honestly, and I think he's a great addition to this room. And I'm really high on this room. I don't think we're going to see a huge drop off either.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to CJ Blocker as well, former 4-star recruit last year. Also looking good. I don't think he'll start, but I definitely think he'll play quite a bit this year.
Yeah.
I think he's super talented. I think the room as a whole is one of the highest talent levels we've had, while maybe not the highest experience level we've had, if that makes sense.
Totally agree.
I do think this room is upgraded from last year. I think the corners are better than they were last year, and I think the safeties are worse than they were last year.
I think the biggest starting piece we lost was obviously the Travis brought into TCU. Obviously, it sucks losing a starter, and no matter which way you twist it, I mean, that's rough. But Keenan Johnson, there's not a better guy to come in, a better veteran
Yeah.
with tons of games under his belt. I'm really confident in this group.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the linebackers. Obviously, the tough news out of spring camp, I believe, was Lavani Demoody being injured, lost for the season. He was really great, I thought, last year. Another one of the, as Connor mentioned, the Stanford pipeline defenders.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a pretty big loss, but I think this is a decently deep room. I think with Karene Reed, Lander Barton, and Sione Fotu as the top three guys that you're going to look at, I mean, that's one of the better linebacker corps in the country.
Yeah, I mean, Lander Barton is just a do-it-all beast at linebacker. He's surprisingly, he's shockingly good at pass coverage. He's actually really good. But he's also a guy that you can line up on the outside of the defensive line and rush the passer with.
Absolutely.
He's someone that's great in the run stop, pass stop. Karene Reed is just he's like a savvy, just veteran player. He's he's one of the best pass coverage linebackers I've ever seen. How many picks does he have in his career? He has multiple.
So many,
I
yeah.
think he has multiple pick sixes as well, which is insane. And then he's also a very physical player. He's great at stopping the run, super versatile. And then Sione Fotu to me is kind of like the brighter star coming into it, younger guy. When he got playing time, he looked super physical, ball hawk. So I feel great about the linebacker room.
I mean, he's a Fotu. He's going to be good.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
come on.
Totally. I think Lander Barton is obviously the star. I mean, he should have been a 5-star in my opinion.
Yeah.
But great showing in the games he has played, and obviously, I think we lost him for the season against USC last year with a foot injury or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm expecting huge things from him. We need him to have a big season. Karene Reed, the pick six against UCLA, is a super memorable play from last year. One of the most memorable plays from that whole game.
Oh, definitely.
Because that it was
we
the
needed
first
that
play,
to win,
and then,
dude.
We needed it. Yeah,
it was pretty slow that the whole rest of the game. I think 14-7 was the final.
that was
score.
a painful game.
Oh,
that was so
It
painful.
was a rough game.
Yeah.
Rough watch for sure. But I think it's the Utah MO, big physical linebackers, and we've also developed them to be great coverage backs as well. I think there's just a lot of talent there that Morgan Scalley can tap into, and I think we have to give Morgan a lot of credit for just the way that he's developed these guys. Obviously, all the defensive staff as well. It doesn't seem like whenever you think there's going to be a drop off in talent year over year, when we have newer guys coming in. This year, it's a little more solid, but we just reload, and the talent level is it's always been there.
Yeah. I do think this is one of the positions that is most vulnerable to becoming a little light with injuries.
Agreed.
Because, Lander Barton goes down or Karene Reed goes down, and all of a sudden you really only have one vet in that room. I think that, the top end talent is really as good as anyone in the country, honestly. The
Yeah.
Karene Reed Lander Barton duo is pretty easily the best linebacker duo in the Big 12, and I think one of the top tier duos in the country. But behind them, Sione Fotu obviously has quite a bit of experience and is pretty good, but also dealt with injuries. But outside of that, I do think it's a group a little bit light on experience, and so that's where I'll be looking as well. Okay, let's move on and talk about the defensive ends. The defensive ends last year had quite a few injuries. Logan Fano obviously tearing his ACL, Connor O'Toole dealing with a ton of injuries, Van Fillinger, dealing with a ton of injuries the year too, losing Jonah Ellis from that room. But I think this is one of the strongest units on the team. I think that Logan Fano back to full health, Van Fillinger back to full health, Connor O'Toole back to full health, along with the emergence of guys like Kale Wakana, John Henry Daly from BYU transferring, a few other guys in the room. I think this is a super strong group.
100%. I mean, Logan Fano in the games he did play last year, he actually had the highest pass rush win rate of any player in the entire country, which is just kind of a measure of if you're winning your matchup with your man, how quickly you're getting by them, how often you're able to get pressure. He was absolutely just dominating. And I've even heard that he set new personal bests in things like the 40 and the high jump. And so I'm really excited about the potential of him coming back in fully healthy.
I think this is the defensive group that I'm highest on this year. Logan Fano and Jonah Ellis last year wreaked havoc throughout the first 5 or 6 games of the season until obviously we lost Fano to injury. But I really do think that the pressure that they'll create, and the havoc that they'll reap in the backfield of these Big 12 offenses, I just I don't see a bigger strength for Utah than
Yeah.
these guys coming through. I think Logan Fano with a year under his belt in the program is super invaluable, and then obviously Connor O'Toole, just a vet guy, big, physical, and fast off the edge. I don't see us. That is the strength of the front seven, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to be explosive this year, and I think we're going to see that trend continue to go upwards.
Yeah, this to me is a deep, versatile unit that can really do anything Scally's going to ask of them. I think they have so many guys that they trust to play that, teams are just going to be, it's going to be tough because we can rotate in linemen so quickly that are totally fresh, ready to really get after it. And they're going to have to, keep their offensive linemen in that may be gassed. I think that this is a strong unit. I expect extremely good production from them this year, especially people like Connor O'Toole and Logan Fano. Okay, let's move on to talk about the defensive tackles. I think this is also an extremely strong position group. I think it's running four deep with Junior Tafuna and Keanu Tanavasa, along with Samote Pepa and the Mahi as well. I think that Tanavasa has really taken a step up this year, and I view him as the top defensive tackle in the room. What do you guys think about the DTs?
I think I'm expecting a huge year from Tanavasa. I was at the spring game this year, and they let us on the field after the game, and man, standing next to Samote Peppa was an experience to say the least. That dude is just a massive body, and I'm feeling really good about about this group. I think Tanavasa is the guy to watch this year as far as production goes. I think he'll be the standout guy. But yeah, I think we're set up really well this year.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the defensive tackle position this year. They're just so deep; it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, I think the ends. Well, I don't know if they have more top end talent. I don't. I mean, they're both so good. I just know that for the interior defensive linemen, we just go four deep with guys that are starting at almost any Power Five program in the country.
Yeah. According to Pick Six previews, both the defensive ends and the defensive line are rated number one in their position groups as far as the Big 12 goes.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is accurate. I think that predicts to be the strength of the defense is those two groups together. And I think they're going to cause hell this year, honestly, for Big 12
I
offenses.
think it's going to be like a dual effect, even because there's a lot of three-man fronts in the Big 12. So they're used to three down linemen. And then if they're bringing forward some sort of linebacker, some sort of defensive back, I just don't know if they're going to be ready for a big, physical, fast four-man attack with Utah, with people like Lander Barton also blitzing, bringing pressure.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really hard for teams to handle.
8th overall rush defense last year, I expect that to be very similar. So now that we've covered the defense and the offense, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the X factors we think for the team. The X factors are not someone that, everyone is expecting to be amazing, like a Cam Rising or a Brant Keithy. You are looking for more under the radar players that are going to kind of, shape Utah's season, make a crucial play in some game. So Landon, why don't you just start us off with an X factor?
Yeah, I'll start it off. The running back room is something that's been discussed a lot. And I feel like every year someone rises up. Every year someone rises up, and I think that guy's going to be Mike Mitchell, which is why I think he's going to be the X factor this year. I could just see him changing Utah's running game specifically. Jalen Glover's good, Bernard's good, but his skill set's a little different from the traditional RB1 archetype at Utah. I think Mike Mitchell is going to rise up this year, and I think he's going to have a really big role in the run game. And I think he's going to make this offense a lot more versatile. And so we're never going to be stuck with a pass only. We're going to have someone where, okay, we need you to go get 150 yards on the ground this game. He's going to be the guy that can do that, I think, in this room by the end of the year. So that's why I have him as the X factor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I have a main X factor, and then I just thought of another one. I just got to give my props to Caleb Lohner. I think he's a guy that will have, if he doesn't have a lot of impact on the field, which I think he will. I think he actually might have the most impact on the field this year in the tight end room, which is crazy considering that we have Keithy and Landon King, coming back. off the field, he's been such a presence in the locker room, and from what it sounds like, just such a motivational factor, such a team piece. I really do think he could be a huge X factor for the Utes. And then my secondary X factor is actually Micah Pittman.
Mm,
I feel like he's a guy that's been largely written off by the fan base, to be honest with you.
Definitely.
Looking at Twitter discourse and just a lot of different fan discussions on the boards and everything. I feel like there's a lot of negative connotation with his name for some reason. And although he's been very injury prone throughout his whole career, he was actually on that. He was a part of that 2021 Oregon team. Well, I think he left the program right before we demolished Oregon at home in 2021. He was actually playing for that Oregon team for Mario Cristobal, transferred over to Florida State, and is now at Utah. He's dealt with terrible injuries throughout his career, but I think if he can stay healthy this year, he's such a talented
hmm
wide out, and I think in the slot especially, he's fast, he has great hands, and I feel like I said, he's a guy that's been written off, and it's a guy that I'll be rooting for this season.
Yeah, absolutely. The talent really is not in question at all with Micah
hmm
Pittman. I think he's so talented. It's just, can he put everything else together and stay healthy for the full season?
Totally agree.
Okay. My X factor, I'm going to pick a defender. I'm going to pick Teo Johnson. I think that with the loss of Bishop and Vaki in the safety room, we really need someone to step up, and I think that it needs to be Teo Johnson.
hmm
I think he has incredible potential at that safety spot, to be maybe not quite as much up in the box as a Cole Bishop or Vaki because of, his build is a little bit different, but every bit as impactful in other facets of the game. I think they're looking for him to continue that, tradition of safety pride at Utah, especially Morgan Scalley being a safety himself. He's obviously got an eye for talent, and I think he chose Teo
hmm
Johnson specifically for that purpose. He saw what he could be at the safety room. I think he could have a big year, and so he is my X factor.
I like that pick a lot. There's a huge difference between like, oh, the safeties are okay, but sometimes they lose their assignments. And like, dude, they can't throw deep on us. Like he's a ball hawk. He's all over every deep ball.
Yeah.
Like there's a big difference there.
Okay. We are going to move on to talking about the schedule this year. Las Vegas gives Utah an over/under win total of 9.5, which is one of the highest in the country and tied for the highest in the Big 12 with Kansas State. Utah has the best odds to win the conference, according to Las Vegas, and is firmly in the mix for pretty much everything this year as far
hmm
as Big 12 championship and playoff spots. Looking through the schedule, the non-conference starts out with SUU at home, Baylor at home, and traveling up to Logan to take on Utah State. What do you guys see from those first three games that is interesting to you?
I actually really like how our schedule is structured the first few games of this year. SUU is a great tune-up game. We have some players that have been out for injury for a while, and there's going to be a little bit of rust maybe that needs to get shaken off. Baylor at home, not the hardest game. It's a good start versus a Power Five opponent, though. And then at Utah State, their program, unfortunately, has been kind of gutted. So that should be a similar game to SUU. But I see us going 3-0 in those first three.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question that we should be winning all three of those games by a comfortable amount. Dave Aranda has had a rough stint at Baylor, which is surprising considering he led one of the best college football teams in 2019 LSU. He was the defensive coordinator on that
Mm.
team, and has kind of since fallen from grace. I know there's been some recruiting battles in Baylor that have been tough to. The recruiting hasn't been great. And I know that there's been some pitfalls at Baylor. That should be a win. And Utah State, it's a sneaky game. It's up at Logan. I guess one could consider it a trap game. I don't think it is. I think we'll win that game comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a rematch against our guy Bryson Barnes. I don't think he'll be starting, but it's always good to get up to Logan. And like I said, I think we should be starting 3-0.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think SUU is a great game to start, tune up. I prefer starting with an easy game like this than I
Same.
do starting with, say like a Florida. I do think it's valuable to get that tune-up game first, get everything working really well. Baylor, honestly, is the perfect Power 5 team to play at home out of conference this year. I think they just have enough talent or just projected to be good enough that they'll be a game that Utah gets up for and, hopefully is firing on all cylinders for,
Yeah.
but not one they're really at a serious threat of losing. And then at Utah State, I always love playing Utah State. I really respect their program. I think that they do a lot with the resources they have. I think the Battle of the Brothers, it's fun to bring it back. We haven't
Yeah.
played them in a while. but I don't think this is a particularly good Utah State team. With all their turnover and transfer portal losses, they've kind of been decimated. So I don't really expect that one to be, all that competitive. So yeah, I expect a pretty comfortable 3-0 out of the first three, and I think it would be pretty surprising if it was anything other than.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on to kind of the second quarter of the season, which is at Oklahoma State versus Arizona and at ASU, Arizona State. This is the first three games in the Big 12 conference play. Obviously, at Oklahoma State, they're projected to be one of the top teams in the country. What do you guys think about this 3-game stretch here?
I think this is the first test of the season. Playing away at a hostile road environment is going to be a test for this squad. I do think that people are a little too high on Oklahoma State, and I like Utah's matchup. So I do think that's a very winnable game. Arizona at home, I think the inverse of that, are actually too low on Arizona, and that will be more difficult than people expect. And then I'm not too worried about ASU. But what are your thoughts?
I think Oklahoma State, obviously, I'm not even threatened necessarily by the team itself. I'm not super impressed with Alan Bowman. He's a similar guy to Cam Rising as far as experience goes. 7th-year guy. He's shown flashes and he can sling the ball around, but obviously not as good as Cam Rising and some of the other great quarterbacks in the Big 12 like Avery Johnson. I think it'll be a tough game. I'm just scared of the road environment.
Yeah.
Utah historically has not played amazing on the road. We usually struggle there, which has been annoying. But I think that's going to be the biggest battle. Arizona, I'm honestly expecting a big win here. I don't think with Jed Fish leaving for Washington, and T Mac and Fafita both chose to stay, which honestly surprised me. I think they'll still be a solid squad, but with the way things ended last year, a lot of Utah fans took sour to the fact that they scored a last minute touchdown on us. Multiple different opinions on that. I think Witt's going to come out angry. I think this is our first real home test, and I think we'll come out with a resounding victory. ASU, I love Kenny Dillingham. I think he's the guy for that program. Herm Edwards completely decimated that program with recruiting violations, and it's going to be a while before they can, get back up to that ASU standard. I think that's going to be a big win. But I, again, love Kenny Dillingham, and hopefully this year they can kind of start turning things around.
Yeah, I think at Oklahoma State and versus Arizona is the toughest 2-game stretch of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really this is a pretty light schedule for Utah, and these are the 2 weeks where it really picks up a little bit. I'm with Landon a little. I think Oklahoma State is a little overvalued. I think that they kind of hit, the top tier outcomes for their talent with their team last year, and I don't expect that they're going to have that same kind of luck that they did this year. I am worried about their quarterback. He's extremely turnover prone, Alan Bowman, and I'm not sure that he reads the field that well.
Yeah.
Sometimes returning production is a little misleading because if they're bad, then you don't really want them to return. And I feel like there's a little bit of that with Oklahoma State where they return a lot on defense where I'm not really sure how much of that they actually want to return because it wasn't that good last year. So I think that's a very winnable game. I think Utah's going to be favored going into that game. Yeah. As far as Arizona goes, this is a team that I think has a lot of star players. I think that Fafita is incredible. T Mac is unbelievable, one of the best receivers in the country. I think Takario Davis on defense at cornerback is also incredible. And I think they're going to be good. They only lost 3 starters to the transfer portal after Jed Fish went to Washington, which was far, far less than people were expecting, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're good at home and with a bone to pick. I think Witt has. I think he's going to have that one circled.
Mm-hmm.
And then at ASU, first year of a rebuild. I agree with Connor. Kenny Dillingham is the guy there, but I think it's going to take a little bit to build. So as far as that, quartet of games go, I think there's 2 very difficult games in there and one maybe kind of gimme.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next stretch. TCU at home, Houston on the road, and BYU at home. What do you guys think of those games?
I think it's an interesting stretch. We got 2 home games and going at Houston. I think at Houston should be a win. TCU is interesting because they are one of the best recruiters in the Big 12. I just don't know if next year they're going to be ready to really challenge Utah and Rice Eccles. I'm not a big fan of Josh Hoover, the quarterback they brought in. I don't think he's much better than the guy he replaced. And so I don't think he's someone that's going to be able to necessarily hurt Utah a lot. And then Houston, decent program away. I don't think they have the hardest away environment, that's for sure. I think that should be a win. And then home against BYU, I think the Utah team is going to be up for this one. I think it's just an enormous roster mismatch. Like people say it's a rivalry game, anything can happen. I think the disparity is just too great this year. I don't think there's any chance for BYU. So I see 3-0 through this stretch as well.
Yeah, TCU is going to be a fun one. Old Mountain West rivalry. It'll be fun to have that one back. Sonny Dykes really intrigues me as a head coach. Obviously, first year took his team to the national championship. Obviously, Georgia throttled TCU, but had a huge win against Michigan. It's been a downward trend ever since, losing the opener against Colorado at home last year. Not expecting huge things out of TCU this year, but I don't know. It's an old Mountain West rivalry. It'll be a fun game regardless. Houston will be a resounding win. I feel it'll be good to play a game in Texas. I believe it'll be the first away game in Texas that we play in the Big 12, aside from Baylor last year. But we weren't in the Big 12 then, so I'm excited for that one. Might be taking a trip out there, and then BYU, no chance. I think that's going to be a 20 to 30 point blowout. Honestly, don't see a world where BYU wins this game. Barring terrible injuries, again, I feel like that's the only way BYU could even have a fighting chance in this one. But I really do see just a resounding blowout win for Utah.
Yeah, I do think TCU gives me a slight bit of pause because their talent level is quite high. They've recruited well. I do think they have good coaching, and I think that last year was kind of on the lower tier of expected outcomes as far as 5-7 goes. I think if you simulated that season multiple times, they would have a winning record more often than not. But at home, I can't really view that as a real lost threat at home
Agreed.
versus TCU. Houston on the road, first year of the rebuild, just hired Willie Fritz. I think that's a good hire, and I think he's a good program builder. But it's just too early. Very similar to my thoughts on ASU as well. And yeah, I agree with everything that's been said about BYU. It's one of the most talent deficient rosters in the Big 12. They really have been, if not the worst Power 5 recruiting team, they've been one of the worst. The coaching there is subpar. There's really not a lot that they have going for them. I expect that, over the next couple years, they're probably going to have to replace the coaching staff and see if there's another set of coaches that could get something more out of BYU. But it's looking a little dark right now, I think. Okay. The final stretch of the season, the home stretch at Colorado versus Iowa State at home and at Central Florida. What do you guys think about this stretch?
So for me, I have a little bit of a different opinion than you. I think that Iowa State and then at UCF is actually our hardest 2-game stretch of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you look 3-game, I think the Colorado, Iowa State, UCF is our hardest 3-game stretch.
I agree with that. The hardest.
If we have a loss this year, I think it will be one of these 3 games.
Yeah.
And I think it would either be at Colorado or UCF. Is if I had to bet money on what the loss would be, I would say UCF right now. Colorado, I think there's so much high end and low end potential for them. If we get them similar to how they were at the end of the year, their roster's been depleted, they didn't have the depth. I don't see this being a problem. At the same time, though, if they've upgraded that depth and been able to stay healthier with injury luck, this could be a hard game, especially if they have a pretty good record, because it's going to be rocking there and it's going to be a hard road environment. Iowa State is one of the teams that I'm higher on. I think Rocco Becht is a very good quarterback, actually. He had the second highest QBR for any freshman behind Noah Fafita, who I think is incredible. And so that's a game to watch out for a little bit. It is at home, though, so I do think we'll come out on top. And then UCF is, in my opinion, the most dangerous team in the Big 12 outside of Utah. With the addition of KJ Jefferson, their offense was already very explosive last year, and the only reason their record was as bad as it was because of some blown leads they had. I don't think that will be an issue again. They've upgraded at basically every position. They have good fan support. I think at UCF is going to be a tough game.
Yeah, you took the word straight out of my mouth. I think this is by far and away the hardest 3-game stretch we'll have this season. Colorado is just such an interesting game to me because with the fallout of Dion this offseason, there's been so much controversy. The controversy has never really stopped since he took the reins at head coach Colorado. It's been entertaining to watch. Don't know about the quality on the field though. At 4-8 last season, started hot, but we catch them later in this season. We did beat them last year with what's our fifth string here? With Batari
Yeah, only
Ferrari.
passed the ball, what, 2 or 3
Yeah,
times the entire game?
yeah. So I to be honest with you, I'm not super worried about that one. It is a home game for them, which we do tend to struggle on the road. I don't think we're losing at home this year. That's why I'm not worried about Iowa
Mhm.
State. We had the number 3 team come in Oregon in 2021, and we somehow find a way to win games at home.
Yep.
Obviously, last year against Oregon was unfortunate, but I feel like that was more due to injuries than anything else. I don't see us losing that one, no matter how good Iowa State turns out to be. UCF is I'm penciling in as a loss. If we do have one Friday game, short week. KJ Jefferson, complete X factor for that team. Gus Malzahn, his historical great head coach. Came over from Auburn a few years back, and his is working on rebuilding that program. If I had to guess which game we would lose out of this whole schedule, it would probably be UCF.
Yeah, I agree with Landon that this is the hardest 3 game stretch of the year. I think Colorado is going to be decent this year. When you have a quarterback and a receiver that good, as far as Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter, you're always going to have a shot. I do think that they've brought in, quite a few good transfer classes in a row, but we still have to see if it gels. I don't think they're a terrible team this year like they were last year, but I do think they're a little bit improved. I agree with what you guys have said about Iowa State. I do think they have some intriguing pieces there. I think that they're a team that, if they catch lightning in a bottle on the right day, could, be pretty freaking good. But it is at home, so I am not worried about that. At UCF, I think is the most obvious lost spot on the schedule as far as like Connor mentioned, short week, traveling cross country the week before the Big 12 championship game.
I think UCF may potentially even have a bye before they play us.
Yeah, so that's a trap game spot for me is the UCF game. That's an obvious one where Utah has a few built-in disadvantages there going in that I think is tough. But yeah, I do think that's the hardest 3 game stretch of the season. If I had to rank the different quarters of the season, I'd say the easiest is the first 3. The second easiest is the TCU Houston BYU stretch. The second hardest is the Oklahoma State Arizona ASU stretch, and the close to the season is the hardest portion of the schedule for Utah.
Totally agree.
Okay, let's move on to predictions. So for me, there are a few things that factor into my prediction. Utah over the last 5 years at home is 30-2. It's extremely hard to win at Rice Eccles. I think this is the easiest schedule Utah has had as a Power 4 or Power 5 conference member by quite a ways, actually.
Yeah.
Most of the games against bad teams they get on the road, which I think is a benefit. Most of the good teams outside of Oklahoma State, they get at home. And so I think the schedule sets up extremely favorable for Utah. So for me, the range is kind of the worst case scenario I really see is 9-3, which would be if, they underperform, things don't gel quite as well. But I still think they have the talent to win the vast majority of these games. And the best case scenario to me is 12-0. I think that there is the potential for a special season in there. With the fact that there is injury risk and considering other factors, I'm going to go 10-2 is my season prediction. I think that at UCF is an obvious lost spot to me because it's coming off a disadvantaged week, a week before the Big 12 championship. Utah may have locked down a spot by then and may not be, entirely motivated to play their full team when winning the Big 12 gets them into the playoff. And Utah usually lays one egg on the so that's what I'll say. I'll say lay one egg on the road and a loss to UCF. I'm going to predict 10-2 for Utah this year.
Yeah, I'm thinking along similar lines with the floor being 9-3, 12-0 being the top. The reason I'm going to go 11-1, and the reason why is because I feel like that's probably the loss. That's a lot more winnable than that's probably the loss.
Oh, I certainly don't think it's guaranteed.
Yeah, I would still say we're favored to win against UCF, in my opinion.
Well, I think we'll be favored in all 12 games this year.
Agreed. And that's something we've never had at Utah. And this team isn't just the most talented team right now in the Big 12, it's also the most experienced by leaps and bounds. Cam Rising has won the conference championship in both seasons that he's played the majority of games. And I don't see that changing. I think this team is coming in with the mentality, they want to win it this year. They're not going to be sleeping on any games. So I think 11-1. I don't know if that loss will be UCF or someone else. It's hard to predict 12-0. I mean, being perfect every week is just a really big ask.
Exactly.
So I think there will be one loss in there. I don't know exactly who, but I do think they'll end 11-1.
Yeah, I would agree. I think this team it really reminds me of the 2019 squad with Tyler Huntley and Keithy and Covey and just the amount of experience Jalen Johnson we had and just we were such a good talented team and I feel like there was a lot that led up to culminating to that special season or I guess what could have been entering the conference championship at 11-1. I think it's going to be a very similar season. I think to be honest with you, I think this is the most talented roster Utah's ever fielded.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think, and quite honestly, this is the easiest schedule, like Tanner mentioned, that we've had as a Power Five team. It's really hard to not predict a 12-0 finish because I really do see us being favored in every single one of these games. I do know that it is Utah fashion to drop an egg on the road, so I am predicting 11-1 whether that's against Oklahoma State, whether that's against Colorado, whether against UCF. I don't see us losing any home games,
Yeah.
but we usually do find ourselves dropping a real head scratcher on the road. Last year, it was almost the Baylor game. We just have one of those games where you come out and
Yeah.
you're really questioning yourself. Where was this team last week? And then next week
Yeah.
we'll play really well again. But there's always one game that just we
Exactly.
never play well. So I'm predicting 11-1, but I am predicting us to have a spot in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Vegas odds, like the win total is 9.5, but like they can't set it on a perfect 50-50 number. The juice here is pretty heavy to the over for
Yeah.
Utah. So Vegas believes that Utah's going over that 9.5. So I do think it is much more likely they win 10 or more games than it is they win 9 or less.
Yeah.
As far as, I mean, obviously predicting Utah to be 10-2 or 11-1, I would say almost certainly means they're going to be in the Big 12 championship
Yeah.
game. Who do you guys think are the most likely opponents for the Big 12 championship, and what do you view as Utah's chances
I
in that game?
think Kansas State is easily the most likely opponent. They
I
have a
agree.
pretty favorable schedule as well as not having to play Utah in the regular season. I also think they're one of the most talented teams in the Big 12. They have a young star with Avery Johnson. I really like how that sets up for the Big 12 championship game. And then in the Big 12 championship game, I do like Utah's odds over Kansas State.
Yeah,
I think that we're the exact type of team that can exploit a younger, more inexperienced quarterback, maybe someone who's a little more turnover prone. And then I just don't think their defense is really good enough to hang with our offense.
yeah, I think that a rematch versus Arizona or UCF is also in the cards. I think both of those teams, I project them to be pretty strong, and I think their schedule is set up well that, even if they do take a loss to Utah or someone else, that they could run off a few other games and make the Big 12 championship.
Agreed.
This is kind of an interesting pick. I gotta go with Texas Tech. I think that team is the most slept on team by far and away in the Big 12. McGuire's got something special cooking, and the way that they performed last year, they almost beat a great Oregon squad at home last year in the preseason, and I really do. I think that could be a likely matchup for Utah. Obviously, you have your shoo-ins: Oklahoma State, KSU, Arizona, Iowa State can make some noise. UCF. The interesting thing about the Big 12 is it's probably the deepest, most wide open conference by far among all Power Four conferences. In the ACC, I mean, I guess you can make an argument, but even then, it's Miami, Clemson, and FSU at the top, and no one else really is close. Big 12, I mean, it really is wide open.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of opponents. But if I had to guess, I would say Texas Tech is probably the most likely from me in my mind.
I like that prediction. Texas Tech has actually had near the top recruiting classes and transfer of the entire Big 12. They've also had horrific injury luck. The last 5 years, their starting quarterback has gotten injured for the season
Every single year. Yeah, I think that there are about 6 or 7 teams that could legitimately imagine themselves making the conference championship this year. I think that there will be, a strong middle class in the Big 12 as far as, those teams there. Okay, any other closing thoughts before we end this podcast? I think we're all predicting, quite a special season for Utah football. Likely playoff appearance, I think. If we do win the Big 12, that would be a first round bye in the playoff format and playing in New Year's Six Bowl after the bye week.
I guess a question I would ask to close is: with this squad specifically, and I'll give my thoughts on this after. But do you see us making a run potentially in this year's college football playoff?
That's a really big ask. I think things outside of the usual would have to happen because with where we're positioned and getting a first round bye, we're not going to be playing like an easier opponent. We're not going to be playing a G5. We're not going to be playing probably someone who snuck in at the end. It's most likely going to be like whoever didn't win the SEC but was in the SEC championship game,
or whoever didn't win the Big Ten.
Yes, potentially like a Georgia, an Alabama, an Ohio State, an Oregon. It's going to be an extremely difficult opponent.
Yeah,
We wouldn't be favored in that game for sure. We
No.
wouldn't be. We would need something. Something would have to turn our way in order to win a playoff game. I think.
Yeah, I do think being the 4 seed and playing the 5 seed, which means the best team that didn't win a conference championship, is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah.
I think that the more, like Landon said, the more likely option would be we would probably lose that first quarterfinal game against whoever the 5 seed is. I don't think we'd be favored as well. I do think that, the top tier ceiling of Utah this year, I think they could, if they catch fire like a TCU, catch someone on a bad day, I think they could make the semifinal or possibly the national championship
Mhm.
game. But I don't think that they have the ceiling to beat 3 elite teams like a
Yeah.
Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State in a row. I think that their ultimate ceiling is probably winning 1 or 2 rounds in the playoff.
Yeah. Anything is possible, but I can't predict a national
No.
championship. It would be a 1 in a million circumstance.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I think they could win 1 or 2 playoff games. I don't think they're likely to. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I feel like, although I would say that this year's team, it's really the first time where you can say that you would have a fighting chance against some of these bigger squads. I know we're all familiar with the 2021 or 2022 technically Rose Bowl against Ohio State. Arguably should have won that game.
Yeah.
Cam getting knocked out didn't hurt.
Yeah,
And then
exactly. And
the horrible kickoff. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of things.
there's a lot of factors in that game that that factored into that loss. I would agree. I think if we do end up winning the Big 12, I think being at the 4 spot or the 3 spot, depending on what seating looks like, um, will be very difficult because we're likely playing a Bama or a Georgia or an Ole Miss. You look at the SEC, you look at the Big 10. Absolutely disgustingly stacked with talent, especially
Yeah.
over on the
Definitely.
SEC. Just teams upon teams. I mean, I could go on. Half the SEC is dangerous
Yeah.
this year. I will say though that if Utah can avoid injuries and keep their head above water and play a balanced game of football, and if they reach their potential, I'm not saying we're going to go out and win a natty, but I would definitely agree with you guys. I think there's potential to win a handful of games in the playoff, and hopefully make a national championship appearance or a semifinal appearance. I think Utah going to the playoff and making an appearance there alone would set us up very well for a future in the Big 12. And when the next round of realignment comes, obviously will help us there. But yeah, I think those are my thoughts.
Yeah, the definite first goal for me is always win the conference. That's
Exactly.
the thing that I'm most focused on, and the thing that I think really is the culmination of your season. If you
Agreed.
win the conference, everything else is, it's butter from there on
It's the
out.
icing on the
It's
cake.
icing on the cake. I do think Utah, the ideal path they're probably looking forward is a few upsets on conference championship weekend, where maybe, a 2-loss team upsets an undefeated Georgia or something like that, where maybe Utah, instead of Georgia being ranked number 1, Utah slides into the number 2 spot or something
Yeah.
like that. Because because even if we're ranked number 8 in the country, winning the Big 12, you're guaranteed one of those top 4 seeds. And so, you got a little bit root for chaos to create the best path, so you can slide up to
Yeah.
1 or 2 based on, how the new college football rankings do the seedings. I don't think they would be the best team in the country by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there are scenarios that exist where Utah could get a high seed by upsets on conference championship weekend.
I will say also, Cam Rising gives us a puncher's chance in any game.
Totally agree.
Every time we've needed him, he's come in clutch and we've won the game. It's
Yeah.
hard to bet against that.
Yeah.
I mean, the only games that were big games that we lost is when he gets knocked out against Ohio State. But he was driving. We were going to take the lead there late or extend the lead. And then with him also getting injured versus Penn State in the Rose Bowl. But both conference championships, when we absolutely needed it, we were able to get that win. Same with the home game against Oregon, home game against USC. Like, he's been able to get those wins.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I feel like for the first time, and I've said it before, I feel like this year's roster has the potential to do something special.
Yeah, I agree.
Not only in conference, but in the playoff. Like I said, assuming we have very little to no injuries, and we reach our potential, I really do give us a fighting chance in any game. You look
Yeah.
at what happened to TCU in 2022. Playing Michigan against a great Michigan squad.
Yeah.
JJ McCarthy led Michigan squad. They won that game.
Yeah.
Obviously, amazing offensive team that squad was, but I feel like Utah could see, barring all things go right, a very similar run to 2022 TCU.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Utah, regardless, is looking at a really good season, no matter what.
Yeah.
Honestly, much
For
better
sure.
than last year. Any final thoughts before we close this out? Okay, well, thank you all for listening. This has been an episode of Let's Talk Utes. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Those really help get our videos out to other Utah fans that are listening. Or if you're not a Utah fan, please tell us how delusional we are, how homer our takes are. We love to respond to those comments. Thank you guys for listening, and let's go Utes.